Thanks for joining us here on World Tech Update. I'm Nick Barber. Coming up on this week's show, we've got some good news and bad news from Apple, a new phone from Microsoft, and a bunch of news from the Computer-Human Interaction Conference I was at earlier this week. Hoping to lure the Facebook and Twitter crowds, Microsoft introduced its Kin mobile phones Monday. With hardware built by Sharp, the Kin will come in two models, the Kin 1 and a wider, more powerful model called the Kin 2. Both versions of the phone will come with a slide-out keyboard, but the Kin 2 has a wider keyboard, more memory, and a better 8-megapixel camera that can shoot high-definition video. The devices will be sold exclusively in the US by Verizon starting next month. In Europe, Vodafone will be the exclusive provider starting around October. The Kin's homepage can weave together different types of social media feeds from sites like Twitter, Facebook, and MySpace, using a feature called KinSpot. Another feature called Kin Studio will give users a simple way to organize their photos, text messages, and data in what Microsoft calls a personalized digital journal, and then store all of this information online. Microsoft and Verizon are not saying what the first Kin devices will cost when they are released next month. As we said in the beginning of the show, there's good news and bad news from Apple this week. We'll start with the good news, though, and updates to the company's MacBook Pro family. Apple updated the 15 and 17-inch models with Intel's Core i5 and i7 processors, which include two integrated graphics processors to improve the laptop's battery life and performance. They range in price from $17.99 to $21.99. Now to the bad news. For our international viewers, if you've been waiting to buy an Apple iPad, you may have to wait a little bit longer. Apple announced this week they'll delay the international launch of the iPad until the end of May. The reason why? Because all the folks in the US bought up 500,000 of the devices in the first week it was on sale. Pre-orders for international shipments will now begin on May 10th. Even with the success of the iPad, Intel executives are giving lukewarm predictions for tablets. Some companies have already shown off other tablet-style computers using Atom CPUs from Intel, and those devices will have access to an Intel application download store similar to that run by Apple for its products, including the iPad. But Intel executives interviewed at the company's developer forum in Beijing this week gave only modest predictions for the growth of tablets or handheld touchscreen devices, often used to view multimedia and surf the web. The head of Intel's architecture group, David Perlmutter, said, quote, "These new categories are hard to predict. We're ready with the technology to be able to support this market as it evolves." You may begin to notice something new in your Twitter feed soon. This week, the microblogging service introduced a new service called Promoted Tweets, which will let companies send ads in the form of ordinary messages. It's the company's first step towards turning the service into a moneymaker. The paid messages will be labeled as promoted, and initially up to 10% of users will see the messages. Twitter will work with Best Buy, Bravo, Red Bull, Sony Pictures, Starbucks, and Virgin America to roll out the first ads. Earlier this week, I was in Atlanta for the Computer-Human Interaction Conference, and one of the things I saw was called SkinPut. It turns your entire body into a touch interface.
So SkinPut works by having this armband with 10 very specialized vibration sensors, and it's basically acting like a microphone that's listening inside your body. And so when I do a tap, you'll see here that I get these very nice little ridges. These are actually sensors from this is data from the 10 sensors. And it can actually listen to these effects, these kind of impacts, traveling up through the bones and muscles and ligaments and so on. And it actually listens to what those sound like, and it can classify them. And if it learns what, for example, your middle finger sounds like, then it can say, oh, I just heard the middle finger, I just heard the pinky finger, I just heard your palm. And then you can bind interactive capabilities onto those.
The demonstration at the CHI conference used a monitor to show the interface, but during another demonstration off-site, the team used a shoulder-mounted mini projector to show the display on the body. There's no word on when or if the system will be commercialized, but Microsoft's interest in what was only a student's product seems to indicate that we might be using it in the future. Another type of interface at the show used not arms or hands, but feet. A team of German researchers are working on a new touch interface called Multitoe.
The main idea is that we're wondering if the concepts of multi-touch, as we know it from things like Microsoft Surface and a couple of other tables, if that can be expanded into rooms. More specifically, we're building a floor that is based on the same concepts as multi-touch tables. So we dubbed that multi-toe interaction because obviously we're not touching with our fingers anymore.
While this video is an early prototype on a small scale, the system can identify users by the soles of their shoes. It can distinguish between users who walk over the floor, which it ignores, and users who actually intend to interact with it. Users can pull up menus, draw, or even type, as the software can pinpoint the exact key a user would like to press, even though the foot may be covering multiple keys. And then I also got to meet Simon the robot. He's a robot that can help around the house and be taught new tasks. In this demonstration, Simon is being taught to recognize certain items and drop them into corresponding bins. After a few examples, he can do it himself without direction.
Where does it go?
It goes in the blue bin. Here it goes.
And just in case Simon goes haywire, there's an emergency shutoff button nearby. As with many of the projects at the conference, there's no word on commercialization plans. Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks for joining us here on World Tech Update. Next week, we'll take a look at the technology behind the Boston Marathon, show you some more from the CHI conference, and of course, the rest of the week's news. As we head out this week, we'll leave you with some more shots from CHI. I'm Nick Barber, and for all of us here at the IDG News Service, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next week.